Welcome, everyone, and thank you for coming to the virtual Loscon Afrofuturism panel.
Let's take that from the top, shall we?
Agreed.
Hold on for a second if you're going to do that. I'm going to close my office door.
Yeah, give me a second too.
Quiet on the set.
Right on the set. Let me change my props.
When did we all have TV production studios in our house?
Right?
You should see this getup behind me. I'm not going to move my
That's
computer,
so
but I have a big rack. I did some audiobook recording.
Ooh.
And I had to hang up a blanket, and I've got umbrella lights. It's crazy in here. I got a podcasting mic, which I love. Let me see if it's on.
Boy, what did I go to film school for?
I'm thinking, why did I become a writer? I was the person who wanted to be in a book, not in front of people, right? Little did I know.
Yeah. Well,
You should inspire art rather than creating it then.
These are not mutually exclusive propositions.
No, they're not.
Okay. Welcome, everyone, to the Afrofuturism. Would you introduce the panel, Tananarive? I'm like all.
Do you want me to do this? I can do this.
Yes, would you? I keep tripping over my tongue.
Tananarive Due, right? I'm just
Yes.
making sure you're okay.
Very
I don't
nice.
want to embarrass myself by.
And my name is Sheree, not Sheree or Sherry. It's Sheree.
I knew that.
Okay,
I
all right.
knew.
All right,
Because
Susan.
you got the accent in one place and not in the other. That tells me what I
My
need
name
to
is
know.
Kevin. The F is-
Kevin?
you're going to confuse the poor woman.
Him I know. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, whatever is applicable. Well, that's what I get for being a smartass. Okay. Welcome to Virtual Loscon 2020 Afrofuturism panel with Sheree. I did it again, didn't I? Okay. I'm as bad as you are. Virtual Loscon 2020 panel on Afrofuturism with Sheree Renee Thomas, Stephen Barnes, and Tananarive Due. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank
Very
you.
excited to be here.
Thank you.
And I feel like the three of us are just sort of sitting at a table catching up. Sheree, it's been a long time, too long since we've seen you. So much has changed since Steve and I had just a beautiful conversation with Octavia Butler in her home in the year 2000. And the subject of dark matter came up, which you edited, this groundbreaking anthology of a century of Black speculative fiction that she participated in. You were her former student, and she was just very proud. And we talked about the Hollywood interest, and she did in sort of typical Octavia style. Well, you know Hollywood, and she turned out to be very right about that back in 2000. But now we, as true Afrofuturists, are all entering a very different world. So that's my sort of long-winded introduction to the panel. I would really love to hear just a couple moments of reflection from each of you. Stephen Barnes, who happens to be my husband, but also an award-winning and amazing writer and screenwriter, and Sheree Renee Thomas, just named as the new editor of Fantasy and Science Fiction magazine, and also an award-winning writer in her own right. So let's sit around and just have a chat about then and now. How much 2000 dark matter comes out, and we're just beginning to form a community. And how do we feel now that we are in the future?
Sheree, why don't you go?
Oh, I feel at turns excited and hopeful and optimistic and just really proud of all of the amazing writers that are able to, just be a part of this community. They are publishing and creating new works. We're getting it at a faster rate than 20 years ago, that's for sure. And it's a really broad range of writers and areas that's just exciting. Not even just on the page, but also on film too, which you all are doing amazing wonderful things with that, which is inspiring to see. Then I say alternate because other times as is a consistent theme of things that we're still, working with and trying to change as usual, which are structural things. But in terms of people creating the work, oh, they are doing amazing things. It's just really wonderful, and there are a lot more advocates for it,
Yeah.
for sure. So that's good. Yeah.
Fantastic. How about you, honey?
Well, I've been in the field for about 40 years. And about 35 years ago, I remember publishing a novel, Street Lethal. It had a character that was described as being as dark as, a Zulu, basically. And they put a white guy on the cover. And nobody at the publishing company, Ace, would take responsibility for what they'd done. And so I concluded that it was systemic, that if no one's guilty, then everyone is. If no one would take responsibility, then it is the water in which they swim. And it wasn't more than 10 years ago that I had a very well-known white editor tell me that Black people were not interested in science fiction. That's why we're not there. It isn't that we weren't represented. It isn't that there were all these gatekeepers. It isn't there were all these gates. It was that there's something different about us. And at about the year 2000, I started seeing the sort of changes that I knew were coming as the demographics changed, as there were enough people planting seeds to finally get a crop, which could then spread seeds through the wind, which would then raise other crops, that you need a lot of failing in order to produce a few successes. So what I've seen right now is that it's changed, and it changed massively. And for a lot of people, it changed overnight. I mean, there are so many people who were used to white heterosexual males being absolutely the driving force of science fiction, and they protest like crazy at anything other than that gaining ascendancy, let alone dominating. The idea that people might be hungry for this is just completely escapes them. And I can actually see their conversations with each other on Facebook. So it's like their tears are delicious. That was not a terribly evolved thing to say, but it's honest.
You can't be evolved 24/7, honey.
No, I most certainly cannot. It's fascinating to watch, and it's very gratifying.
And might I say surreal? I can't help but noticing that Steve's backdrop is Wakanda. And in many ways, it feels like we're in a kind of cultural Wakanda, Wakanda being sort of an amalgam of traditional images from the continent of Africa and wish fulfillment on the part of African Americans who were separated. And it's just like a feeling of home, which is what basically Octavia said that day in 2000. There was a photograph of us at the Clark Atlanta University conference on Black speculative fiction. I think it was the first of its type. And I was so blessed just to be invited as a new writer. And Steve was there, and Octavia Butler, and Samuel R. Delaney, and Jewel Gomez, and all these titans. And I had no idea that I was going to be in the presence of that. I didn't even know where I was and who I was with for some of it. You know what I mean? But so cataclysmic. And Octavia had that photo on her wall, and she said we were her other family. And I feel that very strongly, not just necessarily about the people who happen to be in that photo, but in that spectrum you're talking about, Sheree, of so many artists who at last get to dream themselves into this kind of storytelling. And we're actually gaining power, where before, if somebody called you, you were lucky to get a scrap. But now sometimes you're so busy, you can recommend somebody else.
Thank you.
I mean, I'm not used to this. It's just like, oh my God. But the backdrop of that, as we all know, is we're living in pretty horrifying times right now. And there's almost like a survivor's remorse feeling I get sometimes
I'll be
when,
really honest with you.
yeah,
I've been listening to a lot of people complaining about the times they're in right now. And quite frankly, white people are more upset. The white people, I've never heard any black people talk about how the world is ending. All
mm,
is lost. I can't get out of bed. Not in the same way. And an attitude that I have a little bit is we tried to tell you. We tried to tell you that this is what was going on and that things could be that bad, that people could be that oblivious, that self-serving, would look in your face and smile and tell you that nothing is happening while they're at the same moment that they're doing it.
the foot is
Uh,
on your neck. Yes.
that's right. But there's nothing going on here. So I think that there are those of us who have survived any kind of abusive situation, children who survive abusive childhoods, people who survive, muggings or wars or anything, and come out the other side still able to live with joy and integrity, they have something to offer. I think that Black Americans have wealth to offer. And if we can learn how to express it through the metaphors of drama and the image systems of things like Afrofuturism, I think there are reasons why the world wants so much to read what it is that we have to say. They're not just curious about us, but they're curious about what we might have to offer them to help them. And I think we've got a lot.
Right, right. I think when you look at the Black vote in this current presidential election, that forward-facing power to flex in a very real way to help steer the country back on the course it set for itself. We didn't write the founding documents, and I have some quibbles, okay, about
Okay.
what y'all wrote it. So if we're all pledging allegiance, are we going to do that? Or are we going to do, I don't know what this is. Are we going to do that? And that is actual real life world building. That is, that's what Octavia Butler was trying to warn us about in a lot of her work, is that society has these hierarchies that are possibly terminal to us if we can't get them under control.
And it's
Sheree,
like
did you
we're in
want
a
to add
space,
any? Oh,
I would love to hear from Sheree what her ethic, what is it that she's hoping to bring to this really important magazine of fantasy and science fiction. She's got something unique to give, or I can't believe they would have hired her. They don't want her to just be another editor. What is it that you're planning to do there?
I want to add to the legacy. There's a lot of good work has been done so far. And Charlie, of course, has brought the publication into the future by taking it from just hard copy manuscripts, but to digital submissions, which allows people from around the world to have greater access to the publication in terms of being able to submit it. If you have access to the internet, then you can submit your work. Whereas before, if you're in some other countries, it might be very difficult to send off that hard copy, right? And then wait all that time. So that's a wonderful contribution he made. He also added the publication to social media, right? So they have 10,000 followers that I don't know, he gathered up, I don't know how many years it took, but that's amazing. And it's a great community where people can talk about what's happening. What I hope to bring to it is more people, more of us, more voices. There are, of course, there's diversity in it already. There are people, you can look on a masthead and see every now and then one or two people. I know Alea Don Johnson's, I believe her novelette, Guide to the Fruits of Hawaii, right, was published there and went on to win some great honors. But I don't want that to be an exception. I don't want us to be like a seasoning here and there. I want it to be a normal place that you would think FNSF is a home for your writing, right? And that it's not necessarily a long shot for you to do so, to be
right.
published in those pages. I would also, I love fantasy and science fiction. I'm also a big horror fan. So I, which you already know. So I'm going to be looking at those stories with special glee. And I was,
Oh, newsflash, horror people. Are you taking notes right now? I
yeah.
didn't even realize till you said that how much I did feel kind of like that isn't for horror writers.
Oh, we publish horror. We do, and it's wonderful, wonderful stories. It's just not a full horror magazine. We try to have different kinds of adventure stories, fantasy stories, and science fiction, earth-based, beyond. Slipstream weird stuff is also things that defy the borders, right? Has a home there as well. Humor, if you can manage to pull it off. We have that annual humor competition that readers really love, but also poetry. I love poetry. Charlie loves poetry. Gordon likes narrative poetry, which is you don't get as much of narrative poetry these days. But I'm really I just want to do more of all the good things, but have more people at the party, if that makes any sense, right?
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
beautiful. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. I'm just thinking of Gordon Van Gelder. I think unless I'm mistaking the memory, and it happens, he's the very first editor to reach out to me to ask me to write a short story, which is how I wrote Patient Zero. So it sounds like there's a dream team assembled there.
And I also have I've gathered up a troupe of readers, because we're anticipating 1,200 submissions a month. I believe the submissions went up 10% this year alone. So I know that when Charlie took over the driver's seat of the magazine, everyone bum rushed him with submissions to see what his taste would be, so we're anticipating that. But for my readers, we're just going to look for all the great stories that just demand to be read. The stories that you're excited to talk about. You remember them when you finish reading them. You think about them. You have an experience. So that's what I'm hoping to bring to it. We're going to have a new column that you'll see next year. And I am also looking for some other things. We'll see if that comes up, how that happens. But I'm really excited about this. I know that just from talking with Gordon, and when he called, I had no idea why he was calling me.
Wow.
And I guess a bunch of other things, but that was not one of them. Anyone who knows me, who knows my writing, who knows the work that I have done over these 25 years, knows I do have my own aesthetic and my own personality and interest. And I just can imagine him inviting me to take on this wonderful role that he shouldered as well, for many years himself. And now is the publisher, the one who signs the checks and chooses the cartoons.
Well,
this special joy.
This makes me so happy.
Have me there if he did not believe in that. So that's one thing I wanted to share. And just also this ideal that for me, it's a journey come full circle, because so often our work, and I'm speaking of like Black work in particular, and other communities, if you're not the majority culture, it's considered to be exceptional or not the universal story, right? That's the thing. You're in the MFA programs, they talk about the universal story, right? And that's an outdated way of looking at this beautiful art form that humans have of expressing themselves and sharing and imparting knowledge and just entertaining and making magic of our observations of the world, right?
Yes.
And putting them in this art, in these metaphors, these symbols, as Stephen was talking about. Our stories are universal too. We are a part of the present, the past, and the future, and the futures we can't even imagine yet. And so it seems like a natural thing to have me in this role, because I too am the body electric. Come on.
That's right. This makes me so happy. Wish I could give you a big hug right now.
Yeah, we got this.
You got a big grin on your face too, in terms of the full circle moment on a personal level for you. I know it was a milestone for me to have my first ever television episode on TV in 2020, a collaboration with you on CBS All Access, The Twilight Zone, the episode A Small Town, season 2, number 8. Such, how long I worked for that, and that it was through a meeting literally with Jordan Peele that it came about, and all that, just a dream come true. But for you, you've had some beautiful full circle moments, that being one of them as my co-writer. But how has this year felt for you personally? Personally.
Well, I don't know if I want to answer that without being able to talk about context.
Sure.
Because what it feels to me is that the negative aspects that we're seeing in the culture right now are the result of the positive aspects. It was, every action has an equal and opposite reaction. That Barack Obama didn't create a wave of change. He wrote it. He surfed it. Okay. But he also represented it. And there was so much change happening so fast when you're talking about women's rights, Black rights, gay rights, global warming, and so forth, that the more conservative edge of the picture, I think, was starting to feel whiplash from future shock. And so they did, and I have literally heard enough people say this, they did a Hail Mary pass. They decided to bring in someone who would break the ordinary engines of politics, and hopefully, they believe that a business person could come in and would be better than politicians. We'd spent generations trying to build up this notion that business is somehow superior to politics, a superior form of human organization. No, it's still just people. So someone who, from my point of view, I can't separate my point of view from the things that I say in that sense, was not at all suited to the job, happening at a time when all these crises were coming to a head, and a generational epidemic happening. I mean, this certainly has not happened in my lifetime. If we look at this as the dark side or the pale side of a tremendous amount of positive change, then it becomes clear that the human race has been through this kind of stress infinite times in the past. And we've ridden it out. Not all of us, but enough of us to keep going forward. And so those of us who can keep our heads right now, we're going to come out the other side of this better and stronger and tougher. We have the potential to create something. We can't go back to what was. We can't fix it. But what we can do is create something that's even better. We can go on. We can go on. We can go forward. So I feel cautious optimism that when you have two different vaccines from two completely different sources, one at 90, the other one 95% success rate.
Pfizer went back and I think he corrected it to 95% as well. I don't know.
So what that implies is that we're starting to understand this microorganism, as I always knew we would, because no organism in the history of the world has ever had as much focus on it as this one has, all over the world. And I think that what we learn coming out of this will be useful for other things going forward. Everything has a potential gift if you can find it. This one is tough because we're losing a lot of citizens. But if we can wake up to what happened here and ask ourselves the right questions, then I feel nothing but optimism.
Well,
it's not a time to get lazy.
No.
I don't know about the optimism. I want to be optimistic, but I'm just thinking, in order for these things to prosper and to do well, right, to be successful, you have to want them to be. And I've always known it. I think that this election has probably put some actual data behind it to some extent. But there is a huge part of our country, as there has always been, I believe, who has very different ideals about what a successful nation looks like and feels
and
like.
what a citizen of the said nation looks like.
Not.
Yes.
Right.
And based on my definitions of it, a lot of them want a failed state. A failed state is successful in the sense that the things that I feel like a country should do, the reasons why we pay taxes, the reason why we have government,
Yeah.
instead of just out here on the wild, wild west on our own. the reason why we choose to be a part of this society, and and we supposedly have these laws.
They
is
wrote it. They wrote the documents.
Yes, is for these other things. But when they find that those things benefit the people that they don't believe are human, or don't believe are as good or equal to them, or are deserving, then suddenly those rules don't apply anymore. Anything can change, and it's all forces are being put in effort to demolish that progress or what have you, because failed state is what they want.
What they
because
want,
as long as they're not the ones failing,
what they want is to be happy.
Yeah.
And they think that a failed state will kick over the table in a rigged game, and so that they will be happy with that. And there are enough people who are intractable, who cannot be convinced in the time frame that we've got, that it is scary. But I think that if they were the majority, they wouldn't have to lie about what they're doing. They wouldn't have to lie about us. They'd be able to say point blank what their intentions are. And they have to obfuscate and lie and cover it up and be politic about it. So I don't think that there's
but
more.
are they lying? They literally got on television and said, "Grandma died for us, died so we can make some money." Like there wasn't any shame in those statements. Like we have leaders who's literally got on television and said, we need to open up this economy so some of us can make some money. Yeah, you're essential, but you're actually disposable. Go ahead. They're not hiding it.
You have people who are thinking, saying everybody loves grandma. It's not, what they did not say was these Black people are going to die so that we can open up the economy. They were saying something a little different from that. They believe that the economy being open is actually going to end up saving more lives. They're wrong.
Well, I take solace all the time that there are just slightly more of us who feel this way than people who don't right now. And we're no longer going to be racing off the cliff at quite the same speed. We're applying some brakes. Hopefully I am feeling hopeful, but I also want to point out for people who are viewing this panel when it comes to Afrofuturism, and some of you may wonder, as well you might, what is Afrofuturism? Actually, Afrofuturism is everything that we've been talking about thus far. I teach it very broadly as the Black speculative arts, science fiction, fantasy, horror, magical realism, comics, films, music, but also beyond that, when I've been teaching it for about 4 years, a little more than 4 years at UCLA, and there's a lot of radical thinkers and activists are drawn to the study of Afrofuturism because I think, at least as I would define it, it really transcends even the arts to the degree that the arts have so much impact. Politics has so much impact on our arts. So we can't really separate arts and politics as Afrofuturists. And as Octavia was trying to guide us, we're in a leadership position in terms of our clear-headed thinking. The survival skills have been built in over generations because we've been hunted and we've been, denied, and we're used to, as the saying goes, making a way out of no way. So our grandmothers had no room for despair. So we don't despair, as much or as often. It's about that. It's about the past, present, and future all in one moment, one and the same. And it's the lessons we draw from the past and that we pass on to the next generation that are going to guide us to that future. Right?
I certainly believe, my whole attitude is that if you look at history, you'll see that there are always the forces that mitigate against coming together. There's always fear, there's always pain. And yet from generation to generation, societies continue to become more and more complex. That's not necessarily meaning better, but it does mean that we can see that. So I don't take my personal pain terribly seriously. My personal despair, what happened to I don't, it's not about me. It never was. The universe doesn't care about me. I'm just another piece of stardust in that sense. But I do care intimately about the march of history. So my sense about, if Afrofuturism is the speculative work relating to the African diaspora, then I could easily take the experiences that I've had in my life and use them to think either there's something wrong with Black people or there's something wrong with white people. Instead of that, I ask myself the question, what is it with people that these things happen? What is it with people that we keep surviving and moving on? I would try to look for the universals, because it doesn't seem to me to be productive to point the finger in that way. And it's sobering that our reach can so exceed our grasp at times. But I think that that's just, once again, the way human beings are, and I accept that. And it's okay. I feel like we're okay. We're going to be okay.
Can I ask you a question? Are you allowed to say which hotel you're staying in the Golden City? Do they let you talk about that?
That's the Wakanda Hilton.
Oh my
The
God,
Wakanda
man.
Hilton.
I need to get my visa. I hope, are they taking American passports? Because there aren't a lot of countries that do right now. I mean, wow, what a difference a day makes, huh? I mean, it's all, I'm really grateful for the arts, for the act of creation and its ability to just help me get absorbed in something I think is meaningful, and helps me sleep better and get through my day better when I'm creating than when I'm not. And also the other artists I've enjoyed, so much good television, too much good television, so many good films, books. Yeah, it's anyway, I lost my train of thought, but I think that saying it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. I mean, wow, that's what 2020 has felt like in a lot of ways. I won't forget it anytime soon, that's for sure.
Yeah.
I feel like America got taken by the greatest con artist in our history. And there were desperate people that vibed to what he was saying. He looked like a winner, and that we're seeing an atavistic social response, a thing of a tribal response that under the right circumstances is the only thing that allows you to survive, which is you line up behind the strong man and he leads you into battle. That is one aspect of the way human beings organize. The other way that we organize is sitting in a circle and kind of saying, how do we feel and what shall we do next? I think that what we've seen here is a large enough disaster, hopefully it has enough pain associated with it, that more people are going to wake up and say, we need something different. This way no longer works the way it used to. We need something.
I'm sorry, that's beautiful. Yeah, Sheree, how do you feel about that?
I'm just saying, I hope so. I can remember being a child and hearing my parents and grandparents discuss Reaganism, Reagan. And so there's a lot of echoes of similarity that makes me wonder. I'm not.
Oh, trust me.
Makes me wonder.
Not like Trump. Reagan may have had the wrong politics, but not utterly incompetent. And as far as I'm concerned, a bad person.
I just hope that yes. And beyond that, I lived in New York with Trump for a good while, and he wasn't very liked in New York. So it was it's kind of astonishing that he could rise to that level. If anyone actually knew his actual background as a business person, you would know it's false. All that all that confidence was not quite there. You too could have appeared to be successful if your father was constantly putting billions into your failures. But the thing about it is, we seem to have such a short memory. We go from we lurch from 4 years or 8 years, and then we seem as if we forgot, as if we were just newly formed, and we forgot.
I can promise
the policies that got us here are celebrated by this particular group of people that has this belief, and we just keep going back, back and forth. And I
hope I'm not naive here. I really have so much belief in the arts to help wake people. I mean, you can't wake everybody. But there are people who, despite their background, despite their parents' racism, despite their parents' politics, just get it. They read, they learn, they meet people. It's like the reason urban centers vote blue so often is because people have figured out they can live next to each other and get along. And there are whole communities that have never been exposed to difference, and all they get is the fear messaging, right? So I really feel like the arts can play a role in waking up enough people to keep us ahead of the curve. And also, one thing slightly different this year, as the kids say, one party was saying the quiet part out loud about whose votes constitute legal votes and whose don't. And the sort of implicit racism and fear-driven politics that has been in the GOP for some time, long before Trump, became an overt 1964 Alabama moment for those who are paying attention to take into account in the future going forward, as they're deciding where to put their political energies, what party they want to support, what nation they see.
If you see countless thousands of people choking the streets chanting Black Lives Matter, what has happened? In order to say that, they also have to understand that there is a status quo that says that we don't matter. And they're saying we don't want that status quo. That is the sort of illusion that Black people, in other words, you have two basic possibilities, basically. One is that people are equal, and the other is that people are not equal, across groups. That, in other words, that the playing field in America is equal, is level, or that the the playing field is unlevel. I think there are a lot of people who can't deal with the implications of the playing field being tilted. Reparations, guilt, fear of somebody coming to get them. What does that mean about America? What does it mean about my ancestors?
Fear of retribution drives our gun culture, as far as I'm concerned.
Agreed. And I think that what has happened, I've said this before, but to me, the emancipation was about, are they human? The civil rights era was about, do they deserve to be citizens? Because that's going up to the Voting Rights Act. But what's happening right now is the question is, are they actually equal? What if Black people are actually the same as the rest of us? If that's true, then the system has to have treated them differently, very differently, painfully differently, more differently than most people are capable of imagining if they haven't been slapped in the face with it. It simply doesn't match the myth of America. And myths are more important than facts. They're linked together emotionally. So I think that what's going on right now, hopefully, we get to express our art. We get to express our perspective. And as that happens, you can't go back. You can't go back to before Black Panther. You can't. You can't go back to before Obama. You can't. You can't go back to before all these different things. And every one of them changes the situation. You can't step in the same piece of water twice. It may take time to see the effect, but the fact is that every one of us who stands up and speaks and adds our conversation to the national conversation is changing the world. It's just that there are thresholds of change, where you can suddenly notice it. Oh, wait a minute, the world is different.
Yeah, I'd love to.
Such an optimist. I love you. You're such an optimist.
Well, I'm also gonna pull up something that Angela Davis said. I was fortunate to be, for those of you who don't know, the radical activist, Dr. Angela Davis, was a guest at a program called Black Women Rise about 3 years ago. And I was invited there to talk about Afrofuturism. As I said, there's often a political angle when people talk about Afrofuturism. And she was there, and I asked her how she keeps her sunny disposition. Because if you haven't met, you could think, you've seen the iconic photo, but she's just so at peace and calm and full of light when you're in her presence. And I asked her about that specifically. And we teach this in our Afrofuturism course online as well. But she says, it's not that I'm optimistic because I see the world through rose-colored glasses. It's that if the work that you've done for so many decades and years would make a difference in the future, we have to be able to imagine a different future, even though there are no guarantees. But in order to do the work we do, however we do it, whether as artists or activists, we have to believe a different kind of world is possible. And I love that, you know, that you have to live in the space. I mean, she's seeing things I won't even let myself see, because, you know, I'm not as awake in some ways as she is, but yet she's at peace because she believes in that better future. And it's that line we all sort of have to walk. I think art is our way of trying to create a more perfect future, as I know it was for Octavia, and absolutely, you know, and hopefully we help accomplish that. Did anyone else want to say anything else, or are we out of time?
I thought Sheree was about to say something.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Oh, no. I was just gonna say that that I feel like when you go back and you're thinking about our struggle in this particular nation, I just feel great gratitude to just be in the moment that I am in, even as challenging as it is. That part of the reason, even though, you know, it may sound like Afrofuturism is all political, it is the fun imagining, it is that the what if, the adventures, the quest stories, all of the magical world building, all the fun things that we love about science fiction. But I think ours has a political edge to it on these shores, because so much of our work our art has had to been used to reclaim our humanity and dignity, and to create the space in our art that reaffirms that and celebrates that, in the face of very concrete things that would challenge it and deny it. I think they've always known we were human. They've always known we should be citizens. They have always known that they wouldn't have had so many, and they always know we were equal to them, or in some cases superior. Else they would never have had certain laws on the books. They wouldn't have to stack the decks for people who are so untalented or unable and incapable. So you create the laws and you change them, and you keep moving that ball, you know, that goalpost, because you realize, hey, there are whole nations of people who don't exist anymore. They're extinct. They're not here anymore. And yet we are still here with the full force of this American experiment and all of its resources on every level, geared towards containing and controlling, right? And limiting it. And yet we have all of these examples over hundreds of years of excellence, right? Of courage, of fortitude, and great character in the face of the opposite of that. So they know. They don't want you to know, but they know. And they've always known. So we just have to stay firm in that. And Afrofuturism is a lens that allows me to imagine things beyond that, but also to tell the truth about what is right now, at least as I see it, right? It is a record keeping, but also it's a shot into the future, into the stars, you know, where we will hopefully get to the place Octavia wanted us to be, and so many other writers, right? To have evolved as humans on this earth, and as stewards of this earth, which is a tremendous responsibility, but again, a great honor. So if our writing, our art, our scribblings, our movies, our films, our music making, our dancing, if that brings that joy in people and that hope and that courage and that fight, then I want to continue doing that work. I want to continue trying it. Yeah.
That's beautiful. I call it real life world building.
Well said.
Beautiful, Pastor. So yes, preach it. Yeah, it is. It's about the art, and it's about creating that world in life that we want for our kids, for our grandkids. So on that beautiful statement, we will end this conversation between me, Tananarive Due. I don't know if I introduced myself. Sheree Renee Thomas and Stephen Barnes. And thank all of you for joining us.
Yes. Thank you. And if you enjoyed being at Loscon, check the link below. Please buy your con merchandise at our Teespring. And also, Steve, I believe they're building a Marriott in Wakanda, aren't they?
I'm not certain. I'm not privy to all of the construction details.
Okay, because I know the Marriott's just such a nicer hotel chain. Well, thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful rest of your weekend.
You too. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.